Welcome to those of you that have just joined. We're going to be getting started here in just about another minute or two. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Valerie Weber and I serve as the Community Impact Director here in Akron, Canton, and Youngstown with the American Heart Association. I will be your host and moderator for today's community conversation. This is part 6 in the series, and today we will discuss tobacco and vaping and how tobacco and e-cigarette use impacts the body, including the lungs and the heart, how to recognize e-cigarette and other vaping devices. You'll have an opportunity to hear directly from students to learn what impacts usage in youth. And also you'll get to learn about the tools that are available to the community, including cessation resources and education. As we begin our conversation today, please feel free to use the chat option to send comments and questions as our conversation evolves. When you use the chat option, make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from the dropdown so everyone can see your question. We will have a question and answer session toward the end of today's call. And right now, I'd like you all to test the chat option quickly to ensure that it is working. Please type hello and where you're listening in from. Hello, everyone. Great to see you. Okay, I am pleased to introduce our panel of experts and would like to take a moment to thank each of our panelists for taking the time today to bring their expertise to this community conversation during this very busy time. I am happy to introduce Dr. Martinez, Division Director at Pediatric Pulmonology and the Director of the Robert T. Stone Respiratory Center at Akron Children's Hospital, and Professor of Pediatrics at NeoMed. Dr. Sevilla, Primary Care Physician at Family Practice Center of Salem and Salem Regional Medical Center. Jackie Pollock, Administrative Director at the Respiratory, Sleep, Neurology, and Vascular Services at Mercy Medical Center. And Tracy Benke, Executive Director at the American Heart Association. We are also joined today by Mackenzie Simon and Tiffany Knight, who are 2 Youngstown State University students. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our questions. Our first question today is for Dr. Martinez. Dr. Martinez, how does tobacco and e-cigarette use affect the body, including the lungs and the heart?
Thanks for letting me be a part of this, and I really hope that we'll be able to have a great conversation today. First, I want to say it's really important to know that tobacco use and e-cigarettes are not the same thing. And in fact, Dr. Sevilla is going to talk about that shortly. I want to focus primarily on nicotine because both tobacco and e-cigarettes contain nicotine. There are other substances as well, and I think that will come up a little bit later. So nicotine, think about it as it has short-term effects and it has long-term effects. With smoking or inhaling vaping, within 20 seconds or so, you begin to get the effects of the nicotine. So short-term, nicotine actually does something good, which is kind of crazy. I'm a lung specialist and I'm saying that, but what it does is it makes you feel good. And that's why people continue to smoke or vape. It improves the mood briefly for a little while. There are other substances that are in tobacco smoke or also in vaping that can make you cough and have some other things. So that's a negative short-term effect. Another short-term effect that is not good for the body is it makes your heart rate speed up. It increases your blood pressure, not in a good way. And those things make a lot of people feel pretty anxious. So that is not so good. Nicotine also narrows the blood vessels that nourish the heart, that keep the heart healthy. And it also increases the chance over time of a heart attack, especially if you already have underlying heart disease. And then there are several case reports of people actually dying from acute nicotine poisoning, so too much nicotine, and that can come through various means, either from tobacco or more often lately from the liquid that goes into the vaping. Now, longer term, and by this I mean days to weeks, even months to years, nicotine causes heart disease, it causes poor circulation and all sorts of issues that arise from that, and of course, eventually heart attacks and even death. If the nicotine has come from tobacco, so if someone chronically smokes tobacco, they often have a chronic cough, they produce mucus or sputum that leads to lung damage that eventually causes them to just not have enough breath to do the things they want to do. I think everybody's aware that there's an increased risk of lung cancer from tobacco smoking. It's not entirely clear whether vaping itself leads to lung cancer over time, but there's no reason to think that it won't, because there are other substances that are carcinogenic in mice when mice are exposed to vaping. So vaping just hasn't been around long enough for us to really know what the long-term effects are after decades. Most people right now are probably aware of something called EVALI, which is the lung damage that comes from vaping. Nobody knows what the actual risk of this, nobody knows how high the risk of this is, because it's unquantifiable, because it's likely due to substances in vaping that are variable. Bottom line is vaping can cause severe lung disease and even death. And there have been more than 2,500 people in the US who've died from vaping because of the lung disease from that. Now, another thing that certainly I think a lot of people may not be aware of is nicotine itself can lead to mood disorders. So it leads to depression and feelings of hopelessness and feelings of worthlessness. In adolescence, it actually leads to permanent changes in the brain, because the brain of an adolescent is not yet fully developed until they're about in their mid-20s. In fact, the younger someone is, if they're less than about age 25, because their brain is still developing, they have a higher chance of developing an addiction to nicotine. And what people may not know is that an addiction means it's going to take more of the substance to get that same high, and it will be harder to get that high. So you have to have more and more even to get the same effect. And eventually you'll have less enjoyment each time you're exposed to the nicotine. Lastly, I just want to point out that for women who are pregnant, if they are exposed to nicotine, their children have a higher risk of sudden infant death syndrome and also a higher risk of asthma. I'll turn it back to you, Valerie.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Sevilla now. The next question is, some people think that e-cigarettes and vaping devices are a safe alternative. Can you touch on this myth and explain what makes these products dangerous?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this. Because I get a lot of questions, from my adult patients and also from my pediatric patients and also from their parents. And what I want to touch on just kind of real quickly is, a few myths that have come up or that my patients ask me about. The first myth is, vaping is a healthy alternative to cigarettes. next is, it's just harmless water vapor. It's not that bad. And the last thing I hear a lot is vapes, don't contain, nicotine. And I'll just kind of address a lot of those just kind of in this answer. And, in the vape juice, they've done studies in that, there are some vape juices that do not contain nicotine, but in a study done in 2015, 99% of e-cigarettes sold do have nicotine in them. So there's just that 1% out there. So a lot of them contain nicotine. Now, what I tell a lot of my patients is that not only do they contain nicotine, they contain a lot of other unhealthy substances out there. These are chemicals, that can cause cancer. And the myth about it's just water vapor, that is just not true. It contains toxins, it contains things that can cause cancer. Some examples that I talk to my patients about is, there's a substance that's called propylene glycol that is in, this vaping juice. And you may not know this, but that's also found in antifreeze that you put in your car. That is one of the things that is in this vaping juice. Another thing that is in there is it's something that's called acetone. You may be familiar with that. But one of the things that acetone is in, it's a nail polish remover. So that is something that you are inhaling into your lungs. That is something that kids are inhaling into their lungs to cause damage in there. Another thing is called ethylbenzene. And that's something that is in paints and pesticides. And, if you go to your friendly Google and you type in there, what is all the substances that are in vaping juice, you're going to see that are dozens and dozens of really just not really healthy stuff in there. So it's just, I get a lot of questions from my patients who are like, oh, it's not really as bad as, traditional, cigarettes. It's just harmless vapor. It doesn't contain nicotine. These are a lot of things that we really have to educate, my adult population, and also, in my pediatric patients and also with their parents too, is that, it is not a safe, alternative to cigarettes. Now, I have a lot of my adult patients. I understand, that they're using vaping to try to get off cigarettes, and that is a method. I wouldn't call it a safer method. I wouldn't call it, a method, as opposed to using like nicotine patches and gum and that type of thing. And any type of way that I can try to help my patients, especially my adult patients, get off cigarettes. Yeah, I do say, vaping is an alternative. But it's not as safe as you think it is. And you need to know what the dangers are before you would choose that route as a way to try to get off traditional cigarettes. So I don't know, we'll be able to have more Q&A later, but that's what I have for now, Valerie.
Thank you so much. And we're going to turn it over to Jackie now. So how does tobacco and vaping use impact those that may contract COVID-19? This is a question that's come up again and again.
Well, again, right now, we don't know a lot about COVID-19 as a whole, so we don't know all of those answers, but we do know that vaping habits among young people who end up with COVID seem to have a more serious effect from it. It's curious that around the country now, the hospitals are seeing younger patients who come in very sick. Some of them are requiring intubation and ventilation, mechanical ventilation as well. The Center for Disease Control reported that 20% of sick patients are between the age of 20 and 44 requiring hospitalizations, and those hospitalizations again requiring mechanical ventilation. So it's interesting that there could be a correlation between the age of these individuals and the increased COVID that we're seeing. Recently, the Stanford University School of Medicine did do a brief study from what we have during this whole COVID period, and they were testing individuals for the virus, and it was found that people who vaped were 5 to 7 times more likely to be infected than those who did not vape. So let's talk about what we do know about the coronavirus. I mean, we know it's a respiratory infection. We know it attacks the lungs. Again, potentially those people who are vaping and smoking are going to be at much higher risk for complications should they end up with COVID. COVID is known to damage the lining of the air sacs or the part of the lung that transfers oxygen. So generally speaking, both cigarette smokers and vapors will have increased lung inflammation. And then again, it also causes the harmful effects that the doctors have spoke about. It makes our bodies harder to fight infection. So when the lungs have to work harder or they have a decreased amount of oxygen, that stresses our body's organs. And again, the more stress we place on those organs, the more potential we have for failure. So being a current smoker, current vapor, you probably are at a much higher increased risk for severe illness if you should happen to come up with COVID. Again, we know that the people who are getting COVID usually have a smoking history or a vaping history more so than the non-smokers do. Those are the people, again, ending up in the intensive care unit. They're ending up with intubations, mechanical ventilations. So the other thing that happens is that smoking and vaping involve a hand-to-mouth exposure too. So it's a lot easier to spread that virus when you're going from your mouth to your hands and other surfaces. And then unfortunately, people do mistake a smoker's cough as possibly being something related to COVID. And so they delay treatment or evaluation for what's going on with themselves.
Really important points, Jackie. Thank you so much. And we're going to toss it over now to Tracy. And Tracy, could you demo for us how to identify vaping e-cigarette products? We know a lot of times they are hidden in plain sight. I'm going to toss it over to you to chat with us about that.
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. And thank you, everybody, for the great information so far this afternoon. So on the slide here, you can see, really the differences, and I actually have the products, the physical products here as well today. But it really does show the dramatic difference in what these vaping devices and the tobacco products look like when you compare it to something like a pack of cigarettes or a container of, smokeless tobacco. It's something that we all know what it looks like, the square containers that you can see in somebody's pocket, or, the round containers as well as like the smokeless tobacco. One of the first products that the kind of big vape or that this group came out with was the Juul. Looks something very similar to this. And I wanted to hold up also and hopefully you guys can see these, a USB drive that looks extremely similar, that a student or anybody could really be carrying a USB drive when essentially also could be a Juul pod. One of these Juuls actually contains the same amount of nicotine as 20 cigarettes. So basically as a pack of cigarettes. And what we found is that there are some people that are smoking multiple Juul pods a day, which then in turn is packs and multiple packs of cigarettes a day from the same nicotine perspective. A lot of these Juul devices plug right into the USB port of your computer. So again, very similar. So if students are, masking something that they're doing or things like that, something is as easily as this could be, unidentified and things like that as something that is a Juul or a smoking device. Really, I think when I think about the youth and what they've been marketing towards and things like that, it's funny when they say that they're not marketing towards youth. We've really been working at the AHA hard on policy and advocacy around tobacco 21 and raising that age to purchase tobacco products to 21. Not that it stops everybody, and there's still ways that the youth are doing this. But I wanted to share a couple of these things. Like Pal had mentioned, some of these things are really just in plain sight, or something that students or kids may have that are very representation to something that we have. So this is a vaping device. Looks very much like the Apple Watch that I have on my wrist. And a lot of times what we heard when we spoke to some kids in high school is that, if they're sitting there in class, they could almost use this vaping device as they are sitting there, whether it's blowing the smoke down their shirt, things like that, and almost sometimes became a game to see what they could get away with in the classroom. We've talked to a lot of educators and a lot of teachers who now were saying that, you know, when the kids were in school and things like that on a regular basis, that this was such an issue for them. You know, they'd have drawers of vape devices in their, you know, in their desks at school, and it became such a disciplinary thing that it really did continue to take away from the education that they needed to do every day. Another one is a key fob that is also a vape device at the top here. It looks very similar to a key fob that we would have for our keys. So again, very hard for parents to identify. You know, just looking at things quickly, they look so similar, and, you know, really wouldn't need to look so similar, if you will, if it was something that we weren't trying to mask or disguise as something not healthy or things like that. Another one is a highlighter. So a plain highlighter we all see, and this one is a vape device. So again, very similar items to what we would use every day, and just kind of in plain sight of what we could use. So, you know, the big things is to really educate the community about this, educate the dangers that we know of so far. You know, I feel like for a while we were making such great strides with the youth and smoking cigarettes and things like that. And we were winning, you know, we took some great strides for that. And then the big vape came in, and this whole new epidemic has come in with our youth. And so really what we're focusing on is we need, you know, parents, educators, families to know what these things look like, understand the dangers, and have those conversations with your family members. You know, our goal at the American Heart Association is to ultimately make an end to tobacco use across America and nicotine addiction. You know, our first portion of it is really just to get that education out there, making sure that kids and that the youth never start, because we do realize, as we talked about before, that, you know, once you do start, it's harder to break that habit. So we're hoping that we never start, so that we don't have to worry about breaking the habit later in life. So great things just to hit on, you know, as we look at these everyday devices, everyday things that kids could be having. Just keep a watchful eye out for those things. And hopefully you learn something today on here that stands out, and again, just makes you more aware of your surroundings as well. So thanks, Val. I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks so much, Tracy. So now we're going to kick it over to Tiffany and Mackenzie, who are students on our panel here from Youngstown State. So we would like to really hear the student perspective. Can you share with us what you believe impacts tobacco and vaping usage in students, including high school and college students? And we'll start with you, Tiffany.
All right, thank you so much. I think a lot of the influence is the students don't really understand the risk, and they're not taking it serious. And the parents aren't keeping up with as much as everything the children have on them, or the students when they're going to school. And the other thing is, in high school, it sounds like they're taking it more seriously by taking those devices from the students. But once they're in college, they're more lax about it. And the students could be walking around on campus smoking, and nobody's saying anything to them or doing anything about it. And that makes it hard to stop that. So they think they can do that, and they'll go into classrooms and doing it. And again, it's just not being enforced. And I think what it is too, it's not so much peer pressure anymore as it has to do with popularity. It's like, what is the new trend that I can jump on to do now and get on this bandwagon to gain popularity? And it's not even about the health risk or how much is going to endanger my life or put me at a risk in the future. So I think we need to get these young adults on board with understanding that it's really dangerous for their health. And the other thing is, we need to come up with a reason of, I guess, why they're doing it. Maybe it's because of stress or things going on, which is going back to more mental or emotional things going on with adults and children and teenagers as they're growing. So I know Ohio is starting to get on the ball of having more mental ways for people to go get mental health. And I think that's a great step forward, but we need to be able to let young adults and children know, or maybe have an avenue for them to say, hey, if you have an issue and maybe you're not comfortable to talk to your parents, you can come do this. There also needs to be other ways and practices that we can show these young children and adults and teenagers how to deal with stress and life problems and issues rather than turning to nicotine because that's what they've seen their parents do. So out of habit of watching their parents, they think it's okay because, and it's habit, it becomes habit forming because they're watching their parents do it, and that's their role models. So it really needs to start at home. The parents need to get more involved, and if they're doing it, they need to stop too because it's not good for their health. But we need to get the whole family on board, and we need to get everyone turning to safe, healthy alternatives to dealing with stress or life issues or whatever the reason they're doing it. But if they're doing it for a reason of popularity or this is what all the other students are doing, they need to be aware of the dangers of that, and take that more seriously. And that's something we need to work on, is getting that out there to everyone.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
No
And I'm
problem.
going to send it over now to Mackenzie. Is there anything that you'd like to add, or from your perspective, what do you think causes usage for student usage, either high school level or college level?
Personally, I feel that a lot of students are impacted by their peers. So either they'll see their peers doing it or their peers will ask them if they want to do it with them, and then they'll end up like starting to do it or just getting addicted constantly over time. As someone mentioned before, that it's easier to get addicted when you're younger. So a lot of them are starting in that high school age and then they're continuing to do it throughout their college years. I also mentioned that the advertising companies also put out these ideas that they're a lot more safer method, and as we also discussed, they're not as safe as they're being put out there. So I think that a lot of it is their peers and the advertising around it.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to head back over to Dr. Martinez. So if a parent believes their child has been vaping and they are concerned for their health, what steps should they take?
So I think, first of all, certainly it's best if you already have an open conversation with your child. So ideally, you wouldn't just be starting to talk about this when they're in high school or later. There are even middle schoolers that are vaping. So start in, age 6, I don't know, start talking about all the things that kids are exposed to and let it be an open conversation. Now, so let's say you really do think your child is vaping or your teenager's vaping. Just try to talk yourself first before you go talk with them. Talk to yourself and remind yourself that you want to help them. And so try to see things from their perspective a bit. Don't assume something. Don't accuse them. Try to approach it with truly you want to understand what they're experiencing in life, and you want to show them that perspective. So approach it from an aspect of curiosity. You genuinely want to know. Ask them what they think about vaping, or what do they think about smoking? What do they, do they know anybody who vapes? Try to pick an opportune time. Don't do it when you're mad at each other. And then try to have this be an ongoing conversation. Don't expect that in 5 minutes you're going to talk this all through and figure it all out together. Depending on their answers, the conversation is going to go, a couple of different ways. So, for example, if they say they tried it and they hated it, first of all, don't get mad that they tried it. Be glad that they hated it, and talk about like what led them to try it, or what were they thinking. If they indicate that they haven't tried it, or if you think that they're telling you the truth, just talk about like, well, what do you think about it? And how do you think about it? How are you exposed to it? And then if they say, if it becomes clear that they have been vaping or they're continuing to vape, try not to have it end up that you're mad at each other and they think you don't care about them or something. Your whole goal is for their health, or for their best interest, and they need you to say that. They need to know that you care about them, and the reason you're talking with them is because you care about them. Remember too that the adolescent mind doesn't understand long-term consequences. At that point, they're not thinking about. I think was it Mackenzie or I can't remember which of you. Tracy said, you're not thinking about the long-term consequences of something at that point, and that's normal. That's absolutely normal adolescent thinking. So try to focus on the things that matter to them. Ask them if what was the reason, or what are some reasons that they think people vape, just like was mentioned earlier, because it may be that they're already addicted, or it may be that it just makes them feel more popular, various things, and then try to address whatever it is that led them to continue with it. I think it's really important that at some point in the conversation, this ongoing conversation, if it's a younger child, obviously you have a bit more control over their environment and the influences in their life. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that the older they get, you have less control, and at some point you have no control. So you need to help them desire to make healthy choices. So say something like, I know that vaping might be fun or it might make you feel good, but it has a lot of risks, and I'm concerned about you. And I really hope that you make some healthy choices for your life because I care about you. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. Wonderful, wonderful advice. And I'm seeing a lot of comments come in that this is great information. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sevilla. So what resources are available to the community around tobacco and vaping to help youth and or adults?
So there is two main resources that I have used, and I used these resources maybe about a year ago when I did a talk at our high school here in Salem, Ohio in Columbiana County. And I'm going to try to drop the links in the chat as well. The first one comes from Stanford Medicine. They have something called a tobacco prevention toolkit, and it's under, and you can just search for that. You have an e-cigarette and vape pen module. And what they do is, they have 5 or 6 units that is basically set up for a classroom. I think they have the ability for the students to take a quiz, or for the people in the room to take a quiz. They have units that have, say, where do e-cigarettes and vaping come from? What's so bad about e-cigarettes and vaping? What can I do about e-cigarettes and vaping? This is a really good resource that I have leaned on, and I will try to drop that link in the chat. The other one that I use is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. They have their Richmond Center there, and they have a PowerPoint that's entitled Vaping, Juul, and E-Cigarettes. It came out in 2018 when Juul was more kind of the rage at the time. So that's why the title for that. It is still very relevant now. I have used that resource as well in my community, or when I'm doing, unfortunately now, all these Zoom webinars. But those are the two things that I lean on as far as resources to educate the community, educate kids, and also to educate adults, Valerie.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Sevilla. So next we're going to go back over to Jackie. And Jackie, a similar question for you. Is there anything you have to add around cessation or resources that are available?
I think most of the panelists have touched upon this. It's important for the parents to educate themselves exactly what's going on with our youth today, and then be able to educate. And I know, you've got kids being suspended in school because they are vaping or because they're smoking. And there are programs out there. One that Doctor didn't mention, the Lung Association does have a NOT program. It's called Not on Tobacco. And it is a formalized program where it's similar to the old days of the smoking cessation programs, where they do talk about, what the effects are. And then they deal with those things that we've already talked about, the stressors that are out there on our kids today. Why are they choosing to do this? Is it just more of a fad, or are they looking for stress reductions? So those formalized programs can really help. But I think, again, we have to educate ourselves as parents to make sure that we can guide our children. And I know it's been said that, you get a kid to a certain age, there's not a whole lot you can do. But I think the more we can educate them, just preparing for this lecture today, this conference, there's gazillion pieces out there on the internet, and our kids are so savvy out on there. If they just would click on and just start reading, the education out there is just overwhelming. Just one of the statistics that I took off of there, that 95% of our tobacco users are kids, but before they're the age of 21. I mean, that's a huge statistic. So Dr. Sevilla, he mentioned the the American Academy of Pediatrics, they actually have a website that lists the different programs that they sponsor or are available to help kids quit smoking. So that's just, American Academy of Pediatrics, the Richmond Center. If you get on that, it'll show a whole link of different cessation programs. But again, like I say, we need to educate more than we need to be punitive as we start to move forward, so that the kids really understand that while this is a new fad, and while the flavors are good and they taste good, that they really are causing us harm and damage. And easier to not have to worry about this if you could just never start. And again, just realize that there is danger to putting this stuff into your lungs.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jackie. And that's a great point about the alternative to suspension. It's really important that school districts are offering an alternative to suspension so that the students are actually getting the help that they need, rather than just being out of school. So we're going to head back over now to Tiffany and Mackenzie. So what do you guys think would help reduce tobacco and vaping use in students? And this time we'll start with you, Mackenzie.
I kind of feel that a lot of individuals who are doing like the vaping and stuff don't understand that the circumstances and lasting effects that it can have. I know we discussed that before. I think it's mostly due to the advertising that the companies are putting out there, like I mentioned in my previous conversation. I think that if we implement like programs on information and education, as they were talking about before, that maybe starting as early as middle school, maybe even like earlier. But I remember my freshman year of high school, they mentioned it maybe once in one of my classes and then didn't mention it after that. So I feel that if they're mentioning it every year, maybe like students will understand that there are impacts that can like impact them long-term, and later they can have lasting long-term effects.
Thank you so much. And Tiffany, anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I agree with everything that's been said and ways to help. We definitely need to have options out there for children and families to find different ways to deal with things they're going through in life, or even peer pressures from other kids, or and learn a way to deal with the struggles that they face. So some of the things that they can learn, which are healthy alternatives, are meditation, yoga, Pilates, running, walking, exercise, and there's things they can do that they need to be taught. And like everybody said, education, to be taught of how they can deal with things they're going through in life in a healthy way, instead of turning to cigarettes and nicotine, which is technically still a drug and it affects their body, and they will have long-term effects from it in the long run. The rates of asthma in this country are getting so high because of secondhand smoke exposure, and now we have the e-cigarettes. And we really need to be on the forefront and trying to do something about that to help the country. And also maybe laws maybe at some point need to be implemented about multi-dwelling house units. There still needs to be a voice for the children, especially that are living around secondhand smoke and cigarettes. They don't have a voice. They can't control what they're seeing and what's going on, but it's affecting their health even as a child. So I think sometimes when doctors or things or nurses are seeing these, or the teachers, they need to try to help that family out and say, these are steps that you can take to have a healthier lifestyle and teach your children how to live a healthier life. That way the children aren't having asthma and all these reactions and problems. And like you were saying earlier, the one doctor, about how there's a higher rate now of younger adults that are having COVID. That's something they need to know, because a lot of young adults in this new generation, they don't believe in what they're being told. And that's just going against what they need to be practicing. So we need to find a way to get them to understand how to take this more seriously, and to understand that we are here for them. We do care about them, and we want to help them get over whatever's wrong or why they're doing it in the first place.
All excellent points, Tiffany. And what I heard you guys say mostly was that additional education was really brought up quite a bit, but also some of those alternatives, other things to do to kind of get some of that stress out. So stress management, the yoga. We do have yoga series, a meditation series that are free, streaming series that we'll be happy to share as well as all the resources that were mentioned today. So Tracy, I'm going to send it over to you now. And can you talk to us a little bit about what the AHA is doing to address tobacco and vaping in our communities?
Of course, thank you. And I will say, so this is, I think, my 4th or 5th panel that I've got to be a part of, and this is by far my most favorite, I will say. Just such engaging and amazing conversation from everybody, and I love hearing the students' point of view as well, so thank you for that. Obviously, we heard a ton about education and about what's going on. One thing I did want to point out too is, when I think about, my previous role with the Heart Association was in our youth market programs, and I got to work with a lot of schools starting at elementary age, really focusing and talking about making healthy choices and making healthy choices be that fun choice. And a lot of it was around, say no to tobacco products and things like that. And I know that that has been such a great component, and we've shifted our messaging to include these tobacco and vaping products, so not just no to cigarettes, things like that, but also these vaping products. So obviously our school strategy, a big portion of what we do at the AHA. Our youth engagement, again, we are reaching over, 40,000 schools per year. We've started some different initiatives with, really meeting kids where they're at on social media. I know a lot of times we've talked about the influencers. And if you're hearing things from adults sometimes, sometimes kids, I was a kid once, we don't really listen to the adults as we should. But if we're hearing it from a peer, from somebody who is younger about the effects, about the messaging from that end, and making it in a way that is more eye-catching and things like that. We've really done a great job with, whether our Quit Lying campaign previously and some new initiatives we have. I remember the DARE program when I was younger, that was something that has stuck out in my mind, even, 25 years later. So really trying to connect with the students and the families on that level and working with them. Our local campaigns, really working with our advocacy teams, which is a way that everyone can really involve and engage with the AHA. We've have so many volunteers that reach out to our local lawmakers that helped us pass Tobacco 21, as I mentioned, helping us on more of an enforcement front when it comes to Tobacco 21 and helping us be that voice for those who can't, like we mentioned earlier. Obviously national dialogue that we're working on, all of these things, again, mentioned on the screen. And I think just community conversations like this and bringing in our panel of experts and bringing in some real life experiences and things like that. We got to do last November, almost a year, a little over a year ago, we did an in-person vaping discussion at one of our board meetings. And the kids were saying, how it is hard to find a ride home with someone that may not be vaping. And these things really strike me. I have a very young little sister who is in 7th grade. And for me, it's something that is, I ask her constantly, like, do you know what this is? Do you know what this means? Just to get her level of engagement and awareness about it from what we're doing. So community conversations like this, having, all 70 plus participants that are on at this moment, sharing this research and this information out on social media and spreading that engagement. And then obviously what the AHA is built off of are really our science, our research, and helping us find answers to these big unanswered questions about the long-term effects of tobacco, of vaping, things like that, and just making sure that we're spreading that as much as we can, and helping researchers and scientists with the funding that the AHA receives find answers to all of these things. So excited for that. Again, we'll be sending this information out. We'll send out some things about You're the Cure so that if you aren't signed up, you can be, and things like that to really help us be that voice for those who may not be able to. A lot of folks talked about smoking cessation and things like that. So, I think the great thing, we think about something like this, it seems like such a daunting task for somebody who may have been a smoker for many, many years. We at the AHA, we have resources and programs, again, plenty of them from every aspect, but there's some great information here that, again, we'll share, whether it's texting HEART to 88709 if you have decided to quit, and really those 5 steps to quit smoking and vaping. So there's some amazing resources that we will be sharing with everybody, again, after the call today, to please feel free and share these resources with your colleagues, family, friends, students, anybody that we need to really get our voices out and be heard from that front. Val, anything else you would like me to hit on?
No, that was perfect, Tracy. Thank you so much. And again, we will be sure to share out these resources in a recap email. It'll get to you guys hopefully later today, if not, definitely by Monday morning or afternoon. So at this point in the conversation, we're going to shift over into the Q&A, and Q&A is open to all panelists to answer. So I'm going to go ahead into the chat, and we are going to start with our first question. Do you have any information on how effective only cessation programs are, especially with COVID and not having group gatherings at this time? Any comments on that?
So I don't think that we just don't have enough time to know too much about what online, how things are working online instead of in person. But I will say it's very clear that smoking cessation or vaping cessation are best, most effective if it involves more than just nicotine replacement therapy. So nicotine replacement therapy can be very helpful, but that combined with counseling or cognitive behavioral therapy or group therapy or things like that, that makes the chance of actually breaking the addiction so much higher.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And anyone that does have a question, please feel free to enter it into chat now. You'll see the chat on your right hand of your screen. The next question is, how do you approach children or teens whose parents allow them to vape? Parents are the providers for vapes, and you are trying to educate them on these dangers. How do we as educators and outreach specialists approach the situation? Any comments?
I mean, I can jump in on that. I mean, I get that question a lot, not only about nicotine, but other substances as well. And it's really a kind of a two-part thing. You have to educate the parents and the community, but it's also, educating the child. And that sometimes that can be a pretty daunting task, especially in these times now. But it's really trying to, educate everybody. But I mean, when you're educating the parents and the community, obviously there's different types of talking points and things that are important to that population. And then when you're talking to the child and the pediatric population, there's other things that you can hit on to kind of focus to see what really motivates them. So I hope that answers the question, but it is, trying to get to the same goal, but talking to different populations differently.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Sevilla. Okay, our next question. What recommendations would you provide to administration to improve tobacco prevention support on campus? Any comments on that? And I know, yes, please go ahead.
I feel like if there's we do this alcohol education thing at the beginning of the year, it's online, and then they do something for Title IX as well. I feel like if they figure out something to do for tobacco and vaping, then that would help educate students and maybe provide a prevention outlet.
Thank you so much, Kenzie.
I wanted to add in that, again, a lot of students don't take it serious as to the health effects of the different things, like she was saying about the alcohol usage and really the effects on the body. And I think that's what needs to be promoted more too, is what the effects are long-term going to be to the student's body as they age. And even now, like Dr. Sevilla was saying about the taking those the Juuls and those cigarettes, they have a lot more punch with 20, like having a whole pack of cigarettes of 20 cigarettes just from having one smoking vape tube. That's a lot. That is a lot. And they need to understand that difference, because they think it's not harmful because it's like a mist to them. It's like air. And we have all these machines in our homes now that are air fragrances and mist. And you're like, oh, it's no more harmful than that. And it's not true. So they need to understand that there is a difference between what they're putting in their body, and they need to be more aware of what they're putting in their body.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, can vaping cause pulmonary emphysema?
I'll address that. So the short answer is we don't really know. Vaping has only been around since about 2005 to 2007, and emphysema is something that typically takes a lot of years to develop. However, we do know that substances in vaping products certainly can cause lung damage. I mentioned EVALI, the lung-related injury and death that can come from the products in various vaping products, but the damage that is done comes not only from nicotine, it comes from the other substances that Dr. Sevilla mentioned. Those include the carriers, the glycol, the glycerol, but also the flavors and also the heavy metals that are found in the vaping mist or the vaping vapor, because it comes from the battery that gives power to the device. So the short answer really is we don't know, but we definitely know that there is acute and chronic damage from vaping products. Certain substances we know are harmful, and then there are a bunch of other products that we don't know what their long-term harm is. So I think it's important, if you're a young person who's vaping, you need to understand that the risks are unknown, and you may be trading short-term pleasure right now for something that we don't even know how bad it's going to be in the future. I try to encourage the kids that I'm close to that it's cool to breathe clean air.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martinez. The next question is, does AHA have anti-vaping resources that could be used in the community? The answer is yes, and I'll let Tracy add on to that if she wishes, but we do have some great resources that can be used out there in the community. Tracy, anything to add to that? We'll be sure to share those resources via email as well.
Yeah, kind of just like Val mentioned, it's one of those things where there's so many resources, and it's trying to kind of navigate through those as well, and understanding really what hits that need for what the specific question is. So we will make sure, like we said, we'll send kind of the bulk and the overview of it, but if there are specific things that you're looking for and you want to know if the AJ has resources for them, please feel free to reach out to myself, to Valerie, and we'll make sure that we can help navigate for you, because I know sometimes it can be overwhelming when we see a lot of things out in front of us, but we'll make sure to get you exactly what you need.
Great point, Tracy. Our library of resources is massive. So if you ever do get overwhelmed on the website, feel free to reach out and we can kind of point you in the right direction, but we'll make sure we give you direct links to those resources. The next question is there any information on street drugs used through vaping devices? I know we've heard some about this in the news. Any comments from the panel?
I can just mention, yes, there are definitely, so we talked briefly about some of the commercial vaping devices like Juul and others, Soren, there's lots of different ones, but there are also vaping devices that are designed to be used with your drug of choice. So marijuana is one of the most common other ones besides nicotine. But there are other substances that can easily be vaped as well. And that's part of the draw for many people who vape. And depending on which drug is used, but also depending on what other substances are used, it has a different effect in the body. And as I mentioned, there are some devices that are not commercially available, but they're available locally that contain devices that we know are harmful. But the whole point of vaping for some people is that you can vape anything you want, and that can lead to unknown effects.
Thank you. Our next question is coming through. Is AHA conducting research on COVID-19 and vaping? So I can tell you that we had invested in rapid research funds $2.5 million to research the effects of COVID-19. And Tracy, I'll let you touch a little more on that if you wish to, but we're happy to send you more information on that. As far as the link between COVID-19 and vaping, I have to dig into that a little deeper and see how those research projects were broken up.
Yeah, thanks, Val. So, I think one of the big things is with just kind of like with COVID, with vaping, with everything, the long-term effects is just something that we're still navigating through. I think there's still so many unanswered questions around everything, but we will be sure to let everybody know. As soon as we know things, we definitely try to get them out, as well as our doctor friends on the call as well, from their avenues. One of the great things about the American Heart Association is when COVID hit back in March, like Val mentioned, we were able to release $2.5 million in rapid research dollars that were so graciously donated from across the country to really get a head start onto what was really happening in the community. A large portion of that did go to the Cleveland Clinic right here in Northeast Ohio, which is fantastic, as they were already trying to work on some things and whatnot. And some, we had, I want to say we had over 600 applications from across the country for grants that were taking place. And we were able to fund a small amount of that amazing work that was happening. And so it just, really shows the need for the funds that we can then make them released as soon as possible when things like this come up. Obviously, nobody knew this was coming and what the ramifications were going to be, but we were excited to be able to help be on the forefront of that. And as we know, heart and stroke patients with the underlying conditions are more susceptible to catching COVID, and now the after effects that we're kind of finding out now as well. So just really trying to stay on the forefront as much as we can on that front.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Okay, next question is, we know that a lot of the chemicals that are in vape products are not FDA regulated. Can anyone touch on that and how that can be communicated, especially to the youth, on the dangers in these products?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. I mean, there's a lot of substances that are in these vaping products that people don't know about. It's true that some of them aren't regulated, and that's part of the education process. For people, it's just people think that it's just like I said before, some of the myths that are out there. It's just vapor and it's not really harmful to you. And it's just shocking. Like as Dr. Martinez has already said, some of the substances, the metals, the heavy metals that are in these vaping type products that accumulate in your lungs and cause lung damage. And unfortunately, you saw last year they did cause some deaths. And that's part of the education process that we really have to just wrap our heads around it and try to say, hey, it's not just nicotine, it's not just vapor. It could be some really dangerous things, some cancerous things, and it can really cause long-term damage.
Absolutely. Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat. So we're going to wrap up here in just a moment. I'll give you guys just a few more seconds to enter another question in the chat if you have one. But in the meantime, I'd like to give our panelists just a quick few seconds to give closing comments if they wish, and we will start with our students. If you could please just come on and let everyone here on the call know one thing that you hope they will take away from today's conversation, and we'll start with you, Tiffany.
Okay, thank you. I hope everyone takes away that they need to be more involved in their children's life and their young adults' life, and be that positive influence they need, and have open communication with them where they can tell them ways of whatever they're going through in life of dealing with it, instead of turning to nicotine or other drugs to get through whatever they're going through in life, and know that there's help and people care out there and are willing to help them with a lot of different resources.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And Mackenzie, I'll turn it over to you. Anything that you hope that our attendees will take away from today's conversation?
Personally, I just hope they take away that the educational piece is really important in this topic. If we're willing to educate everyone at an earlier age, I feel that it can help with the vaping usage in high schoolers and even younger, because people are using it younger than that. So I just hope the educational piece is really hitting home.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. And Jackie, any final words?
I will just use the same words I used with my own children. We don't know what are in these chemicals and these vaping devices. We know even in nicotine, it's not the same nicotine it was 60 years ago. So, if you're trying to follow a fad, you just need to be aware that, there are hazards out there, and we don't want those hazards into our body. Thankfully, my children listen to me and never even touched a cigarette, let alone any kind of vaping devices. So it's just really important to educate yourself up front and to be a leader, not a follower.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jackie. Dr. Sevilla, any last words or comments for our attendees?
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, it's just first, thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel, and I guess just from the point of the just in this whole pandemic is that I've been telling all my patients, and especially people in the community, is that we're not seeing each other as much. We should really check on each other, make sure we're doing okay. Of course, nicotine and other substances, people kind of have turned to that as part of stress and type of things. From a bigger picture standpoint, check on your friends and neighbors. Make sure they're doing okay, and if they are participating in vaping or smoking or any kind of substance abuse or something like that, check on them, make sure they're doing okay, because we are going to get through this together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Sevilla. And Dr. Martinez, any last words or comments for the attendees today?
I would say I totally agree with, I would say everything that everybody else has said. But also I want to say to anybody who is addicted, whether through cigarettes or vaping or other forms of nicotine, I just want to say there really is hope. You don't have to stay addicted. It's not easy, but you're strong enough to handle this. You can get help, and you'll find that life on the other side is a lot better. So good luck.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. And Tracy, one thing that you hope the attendees will take away from today's conversation?
Honestly, everything that everyone has said. I mean, like I mentioned, this has been one of my favorite panel discussions to be a part of. And really just that awareness piece. When we think about just taking that extra couple minutes to take a look around, understand what's happening, have those conversations that might be uncomfortable at times, but will make such a lasting impact. And it's never too young to start talking about it with our families, with our friends, things like that. It's never too early, but it can definitely be too late. So just thank you again for everybody for taking the time to not only be on the panel, but those who are watching with us today, and look forward to continuing to make an impact together. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tracy. So in closing, I would like to thank our panelists again for taking the time to bring your expertise to today's conversation. And a big thank you to all of our healthcare teams across our region. Your dedication and focus is inspiring, and we really appreciate your tireless work and dedication. And I would like to thank our listeners. Thank you to all attendees who have joined us today. We will email all resources discussed to the group, and we look forward to continuing the conversation as we plan future events with your feedback and needs in mind. Thank you all again, and stay well.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.